The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is end-to-end testing, mobile application testing in an agile world. Our guest speaker today is Vinayak Gaur, Practice Head of Mobile Application Testing at Hexaware. Vinayak Gaur specializes in the implementation of QA accelerators through various test automations, processes, and techniques. Vinayak has been instrumental in architecting enterprise-level test automation solutions spanning through automation planning, framework design and implementation, ROI tracking, and analysis for various clients. He has formulated QA strategies across various technologies including client-server, web-based architecture, and more. He is well-versed in various test methodologies such as V, RUP, and Agile with a high proficiency in IBM Rational and the HP suite of QA tools. So, without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker for today. Over to you, Mr. Vinayak.
Thanks, Radha. So, thank you very much for joining the web conference today. I'm Vinayak Gaur, Practice Manager of Mobile Application Testing Center of Excellence at Hexaware Technologies. And I'm based out of the US currently, and it's quite easy early in the morning here, so I apologize if I might sound a little bit raspy at times. So I'm just putting this on a presenter view so that you can view my screen. So during today's session, we'll be looking at some of the important parameters and levers for testing mobile application in an agile model. Now, the approach for creating an effective QA strategy for a mobile application using agile starts with understanding the trends adopted by the market impacting application testing. So now let's look at some of these trends. With respect to the top industries involved in using mobile apps, the biggest traction has been observed in financial, travel, and transportation, as well as retail and manufacturing sector. These industries have mobile applications for both external, including partners, consumers, and internal users with a ratio of 60 to 80%. And there has been an industry-wide drive to adopt agile methodologies for mobile application development that has increased by the tune of 60% in the last 3 years. This is majorly factored by the need for faster time to market, aggressive mobile adoption requirements amongst various companies. Majority of the mobile testing projects, especially the new applications, follow rapid application development or agile methodologies that require short cycles of implementations accompanied with aggressive schedules of testing. So you see that with that, the test automation is considered quite critical. However, in Agile, as the testing effort increases with time, you would require certain efficiencies, be it in terms of test automation or the usage of utilities that would help you in reduction of manual testing effort. However, test automation is still considered tricky as majority of the commercial solutions are still evolving, and there's a lack of framework support driving ROI from test automation activities. Very few organizations have an end-to-end performance testing strategy for mobile applications. A robust mobile performance testing strategy involves validating performance SLAs at both server and device level. In fact, we're going to discuss some of these important aspects when we go into the details in this session. Now, before you embark on the journey of planning mobile application testing in Agile, it's quite important to plan your testing readiness for Agile. To that end, it's important to analyze the various factors that participate in an overall mobile testing strategy. First and foremost being the market survey. It's quite important to understand the regional mobility characteristics of the market you plan to launch your mobile application for. An in-depth analysis of region-specific preferences of mobile platforms, specific versions of mobile operating system, browsers will provide a good insight into the most recommended mobile configurations for testing and any distribution of testing across configurations of operating system, versions, devices, or browsers, especially in case of mobile web testing. The second factor being the end-user expectations. In order to define catalog of mission-critical test types for your application, it's very important to understand the expectations from end users. Now let's look at some of these expectations. According to a recent study, 60% of mobile users will abandon your application or mobile website if it doesn't load within 3 seconds. Having an application available on some devices and not others is a death sentence in a mobile world. Now if you're aiming for widespread adoption, then you need to provide a seamless user experience regardless of the device. If your customers are sharing their private information in your application, they would like to be ensured that their privacy is not compromised. The third factor being the testing challenges. Now, in order to formulate a good testing strategy, you need to be preemptively able to analyze what challenges lie ahead in planning testing on your mobile application. This is very, very critical for an Agile project. Could there be limitations of schedule or a short testing cycle? If yes, an appropriate test automation strategy could provide not only a better regression test coverage, but also coverage of mobile operating system versions and device configuration. If the challenge is in the need to collaborate to accommodate testing between various distributed teams, you need to decide on a centralized infrastructure with access points from various locations. Other challenges could be pertaining to the usage of tools, coverage of testing across test cycles, etc. The fourth factor that comes into play would be the application type. Approach for different application types is different for web and native mobile applications. While the matrix for device, operating system, and version configuration is the key for testing native application, the supported browser types to be employed for testing based on the market survey is important for browser-based applications. Besides, criteria for usability testing varies between native and web-based mobile applications. The fifth factor, which is also quite important, would be the test infrastructure requirements. Factors like team distribution, volume of mobile applications to be tested, and predictability of QA schedules play an important role in deciding the testing infrastructure to be used. Choice of maintaining your own mobile testing devices or cloud-based services like Perfecto, Device Anywhere, etc. varies from organizational leads for testing their mobile applications. So with that in mind, we're going to look at a snapshot for test mobile application in Agile. This is how a typical plan for mobile application testing in Agile looks like. The first sprint, called Sprint 0 or the planning sprint, requires that the testing infrastructure is finalized before the testing actually commences, or rather the next few sprints are planned. This involves creation of the mobile device test matrix corresponding to the mobile platforms, versions, and the device models. This is where we would be utilizing the market statistics to ensure a weighted test distribution of what percentage of testing would be conducted across specific mobile devices configuration. And this is quite important because with the new devices being introduced in the market and the new versions coming every 3 to 4 months on an average, you need to have a better handle on what exactly would be tested down the line. I mean, you cannot afford to test basically all the devices, all the versions that are currently used by the market users, as well as various, of course, I mean, you have to have a good coverage of the mobile platform, but to have a sensible coverage of what configuration will be tested, it's very important to include market statistics in terms of understanding and creating a device test matrix that you utilize your testing across all the sprints down the line. And of course, this has to be evolving as well, because if a new device is introduced in the market which is picking up a good market share, you might want to refine your device test matrix to include that configuration in your testing strategy as well. Now this Sprint 0 also involves finalizing on whether devices would be procured locally or a cloud-based test infrastructure will be used. In any case, the test infrastructure procurement should be completed by the end of planning sprint. Next, the test automation frameworks needs to be formulated at this point in time. So, and of course, that means that you would have already finalized on the selection of the tool. The automation tool could be a commercial solution like Perfecto Mobile, C-Test, Eggplant, Java solution, or it could be an open source tool like Robotium, MonkeyTalk, or Selenium for web mobile applications. The choice of automation solution basically depends on various factors. Support for mobile platforms and new versions, automation methodology, supported automation technique like image versus text versus native automation, or support for test recording, or any ease of script development and maintenance are the key here. Also important at this point in time is to ensure the availability of the setup for application distribution for testing, whether it would be an OTA, which is over-the-air setup, or instrumentation framework required for test automation implementation. You have to ensure that all these factors have been finalized with the help of the development team in some cases, because you may not have the flexibility of instrumenting the code unless your tool provides that. There are some tools in the market, for example, C-Test, that have instrumentation capabilities as part of the integrated application manager, which could be used as well. Finally, the testing imperatives needs to be defined. Now, the testing imperatives doesn't only mean the type of testing that needs to be conducted, which will be elaborated across all the sprints, but also important factors in terms of test data development strategy, or the usage of test environments, etc., that needs to be defined as well. Now, one important point to note here is that if you have decided or defined the types of testing that would be conducted, you need to keep that in mind, that it's important to make sure that all the sprints basically have a slice of testing types or the requirements corresponding to each of the testing types defined as part of the elaboration cycle of the sprint planning sessions that you will be conducted. However, the degree of testing type may vary from sprint to sprint depending on the objective of the requirement that is being implemented, or the type of user stories that are being implemented for that particular sprint. Now, from sprint 1 onwards, each story needs elaboration vis-a-vis testing types. As a tester, it is quite important that the quadrant of testing is defined during sprint planning sessions, and the acceptance criteria corresponding to each test type should be discussed with the product owner and the team. To facilitate, the story template can be created ensuring the acceptance criteria for each candidate testing types. And of course, at this point in time, once you are in the sprints, you would be enhancing your automation suite to make sure that the acceptance criteria for the current user stories are being implemented depending on the framework that you would have chosen during the planning session, during the planning sprint, and your automation suite is enhanced because you would be requiring your increased capabilities of the automation suite for regression testing of your mobile application on regular basis. So the first solution lever, or rather the most important lever for testing an agile model, is to establish the relevant test types and specific testing needs for the application. This forms the basis for your master test strategy as well, and the testing imperatives vary from application to application and can be facilitated by discussions with product owners. Now, what I've described here is a snapshot from an existing project where we consider different testing types to be quite important. And for this project, we had a requirement to ensure that there is a proper device build management strategy along with the test data management strategy, because test data was the key for this kind of financial application. However, in some cases, you may not consider that test data is important because your focus will be more on usability or functionality testing without the need for generating additional effort for test data management. In any case, it is quite important to understand what kind of mobile application you are testing, so you define the imperatives in line with the requirements for testing. And you have to ensure that these imperatives are also discussed and finalized with the help of product owners and the rest of the team. So to understand what kind of testing types may be relevant for your application, and again, this is not a complete exhaustive list. You may choose to add additional testing types depending on the requirements, but based on my experience, I've seen that majority of the applications require testing types that fall in one of these categories, or rather one or more of these categories. So functional testing, which involves testing of application functional areas, interaction of application functions with mobile operating system features, or interoperability with other mobile applications, be it system and user applications, and navigational tests. Whereas compatibility testing ensures your application has been tested with respect to the compatibility with supported mobile operating system families and versions. It also involves compatibility with supported OS devices, be it phones, tablets, and specific models that are out there in the market. Now, for compatibility testing, it's very important to ensure that you are in tune with the market trends in terms of the usage of operating system versions and devices. What I mean by that is, let's say if an application is being developed for North America region or a European market, you need to make sure and understand what kind of devices, what kind of operating system versions are widely used in that region. Performance testing, which is ensuring that your application can withstand the load, or rather the server can withstand the load which the application would be subjected to from various users. So it is not just a server level performance, but the device level performance testing that is important here, where you need to understand the impact of application usage on the device in terms of battery, storage, memory usage, etc. The next would be the usability testing. Now, usability testing is quite important, which most of the companies overlook. Nevertheless, it's very important to understand what are the usability criteria defined by the operating system for the application to adhere to. So this involves not just the ease of using application features, but also the conformance to the application usage standards, be it human interface principles or platform guidelines based on the mobile operating system platform. Keep in mind that the usability guidelines for iOS are different from the usability guidelines for Android. So if an application is to be developed on a specific platform, you need to make sure that those guidelines are translated into specific test cases and the validation criteria is defined accordingly. Device testing and factory testing are another two types of testing, which you would consider as part of a template testing, where you check for the basic device features while the application is running. It may also involve testing of resetting of application customizations, installation, uninstallation tests, etc. Now, another type of testing which sometimes is combined with usability testing, I personally choose not to do that, but based on the market trend, I have basically listed usability and compliance testing together. Compliance testing is an important testing type which involves testing of features like accessibility, etc., that your application should support. Certain applications have urgency to ensure that their compliance based on the standards defined, be it in terms of government regulations or requirement for the market, to be adhered to as part of the testing strategy. Overall, it's very important to understand that each of these testing types are to be defined in all the sprints or all the participating sprints that you'll be developing the user stories in. However, certain testing types you would be spending more effort during the initial sprints, while once you progress in the Agile model, you would realize that the effort that goes in specific testing types may change drastically. It is recommended that each sprint has certain percentage of relevant testing types defined. However, certain sprints will focus on validating specific areas than others. For example, the focus of earlier sprint testing will be heavier on functionality, compatibility, validation, usability, and ensuring that the device-level performance SLAs are met. On the other hand, the gradual shift of testing effort will move towards security and compliance testing along with server-level performance testing. Although these are not hard trends, the focus of testing seems to be following this distribution pattern. And that's what is represented here. You would see in this diagram, and this is actually from an existing project that we have in flight, where we have observed that the focus of the testing was more on functionality, compatibility, usability, and performance device level during the initial set of sprints, which reduced to a certain degree. In some cases, for example, functionality testing, you would see that the effort variation would not, or rather, the distribution of effort would not reduce drastically even in succeeding sprints. However, you would be spending more time in usability testing in the initial sprints than the succeeding sprints down the line. So the second solution lever, which is quite an important decision to ensure that an effective testing strategy, is to use either a cloud, be it a public or a private cloud, or local device infrastructure. Now, it's quite an important decision that most of us are grappling with today, whether to go cloud or not. There's no universal choice here. It solely depends on specific requirements for testing. Some of these parameters that may help you in deciding whether you want a cloud infrastructure or a local infrastructure for your testing could depend on things like, say, for example, distribution of testing teams. Now, if you need to collaborate with different teams as part of this distributed test team, a cloud-based device model could help greatly. It provides common access to all devices as part of the test configuration matrix. The second factor could be in terms of the support for multiple mobile platforms. Likewise, if you need to ensure that the testing on various applications on various platforms is to be conducted based on the requirements for devices, the coverage of devices, the coverage of operating system versions, a public cloud configuration could provide a good coverage in that aspect. And the third factor could be in terms of organizational info security constraints. What it means is that certain organizations, especially financial clients like asset managers, banking industries, or insurance clients, do not want any specific elements of their applications to be exposed to public. So public cloud would be a big no-no in such cases. You would either be procuring devices locally or setting up a private cloud based on your requirements for testing. Now, there are a lot of solutions that are available in the market for setting up a private cloud. There are commercial models like Perfecto Mobile, Device Anywhere, or C-Test that can basically help you in creating a private cloud based on your infrastructural requirements or the number of devices that you would be participating in testing in your test cycles. Then another factor could be in terms of need for network coverage across the regions. What it means is that in some cases the application testing requires testing coverage vis-a-vis regional networks to ensure the feedback based on network characteristics. Other factors could be related to certain applications that can only be accessed on client devices, and that is very true for telecom companies like Verizon, Vodafone, Orange, etc., which are basically applications that can be installed on specific client devices. In such cases, accessing the client device on-site would require a setup of a private cloud for efficient testing. Otherwise, the option would be to log onto the client machine, which would have the device connected, and you would have a way to view the device viewer. However, that is considered quite inefficient because we have all experienced the delays that we basically come across when we're accessing the virtual desktop, accessing a client machine from offshore or different locations. So the better solution would be to basically set up a private cloud where the devices are hosted on the client network, and you can access it through VPN or your network at offshore or remote locations. And the last factor could be in terms of the cost of infrastructure setup and sustenance. The project cost and budget could play a very important role in selecting the test infrastructure. A cloud-based solution is an ongoing cost, especially with private cloud, where the cost would be hourly or monthly based. Likewise, even with public cloud. Likewise, even with private cloud, some of the commercial models can be deemed quite expensive to set up when additional devices need to be added in the cloud from time to time. Hence, analysis of the infrastructure maintenance cost in line with the device usage test matrix and future requirements is quite important. The third solution lever would be with respect to the reusable test. Now, certain test types, especially platform tests and usability tests, can be created in the form of a template checklist of reusable tests that can be applied for any application. Likewise, any new sprint testing can utilize a checklist so that a new screen or functionality that is being delivered is validated against specific platform characteristics or guidelines. To that end, you can basically create a checklist to validate each screen or the UI element that is being delivered as part of the user story in 3 dimensions. And these could be in terms of design, human interaction, and usability principles. Now, analyze the requirement for a user story and apply each of the provided test parameters to create a test criteria. So what you see on the screen is an example test matrix which could help you in creating a checklist of the sort for testing the usability of your application. So you need to basically ensure each screen within your application is analyzed on the basis of the 3 parameters of user experience, including design, interaction, and usability, where the test would be corresponding to each of the subcategories provided in terms of the layout, navigation, positioning of icons, or when it comes to interaction, it could be in terms of visual feedback, like error messages, warnings, touch screen feedback, etc., along with the factors combined with the type of test that you will be conducting. So this would help you in ensuring that every time a new sprint is introduced, or rather a new user story is introduced in a sprint, you validate the screen that is being developed on the basis of these user principles. Now, the fourth solution lever, which I believe is very critical for testing an agile model, would be choosing the right test automation framework. So the right automation framework extends the automation suite, should not only provide the basic requirements for test automation, but also ease of test maintenance and change management. Some of the factors or the principles that you would be looking at creating the automation suite should be based on extensibility, which means that your automation suite should provide you coverage not only of specific operating system versions, but also of various devices. Please keep in mind that most of the commercial solutions do promise that their automation tool will work across all devices, you can basically create one script for all platforms, which is most of the time not true. So you have to make a conscious decision of what automation framework or the tool you will be using to make sure that you're not investing a lot of time in creating separate scripts for separate devices. Otherwise, the whole idea of efficiency would get lost. Likewise, the second important parameter would be in terms of your maintainability and reusability aspects. So reduction in test suite maintenance effort through automation technique is very important. We'll actually talk about it a little bit in this session as well. Then the scalability, which is ensuring that you can extend your automation framework to different mobile operating systems. That is, one script should work across Android and iOS, is also very important. And last but not the least, data-driven aspects should also be incorporated in automation suite for mobile applications. That is, the test data should be abstracted from test scripts. Now, to just talk a little bit more here, and this being my favorite topic, is that there are a lot of tools available in the market, be it Perfecto Mobile, Java Solutions, ZapFix, Eggplant, CTest, etc., which promise that they have techniques to make sure that the script can work across multiple platforms. So how does it actually work? I mean, do you really think it can work? Because based on our experience, we have not really come across many tools that will provide that kind of capability. So the key here is the tool that would provide a native automation support. Now, native automation support is not to be confused by the automation for native applications. Each automation tool works on the principle of either UI image recognition or text recognition, or native object automation. What it means is that you have access to the underlying native properties of the objects that the developer has provided while building the UI screen. So once you have access to the native object properties, you will be able to have a better control or handle in terms of how the objects are changed across the UI. You will also have access to the underlying properties like text or certain state of the objects to be able to automate in a more effective way. And also, if you are using IDs and names that have been assigned by the developers, you'll be able to create a framework where the same object across different platforms would use a different ID, and your tool would provide a way of ensuring that each ID is associated based on the type of mobile platform that the object is being utilized. So unless the flow of the scenario changes across the platform, you would be able to automate the same scenario across the platforms by using the same script, by having a configuration file that defines the configuration of the object across different platforms. The fifth solution lever would be with respect to the device level performance testing, which could be perceived as an extension of functional test automation. Now, in order to reduce the testing effort during a sprint, a composite testing strategy could be used when it comes to device level performance testing. Now, what it means is that you may be able to implement device level performance testing as part of a functional test automation implementation. Now, you see, device level performance testing involves capturing the CPU, memory, battery usage characteristics while your application business scenarios are being executed. This means when you implement functional test automated scripts, you could add performance counters that could provide you metrics of CPU, memory, or battery usage at specific transaction points within the test scenarios. Now, what you need to do in order to achieve this is either you would require either the support from the automation tool or understanding of system utilities. For example, tools like C-test, JAMOS, etc. provide counters for capturing CPU, memory, or battery usage. Alternatively, on an Android platform, you would capture the DUMSys information. DUMSys is quite an important utility, by the way, which could, I'm sure many of you must have used it because it provides you a lot of good system information that could help to understand what is the impact of your device, your application on the device. So you could actually basically capture the DUMSys information to gather specific matrix and spit it out in your logs or reporting framework. Similarly, in order to create a model of device stress testing, you might want to execute the key business scenarios in a multiple iteration and capture the performance metrics at the end of each iteration to understand the trend of performance degradation or impact of the application usage on the device. This could be used on key devices as per the device test matrix that you would have created as part of your Sprint Zero. Now, also important to understand here is that you could accommodate some system utilities in your performance testing as well without adding any additional testing effort. Android ADB utilities like Monkey, which is a UI exerciser, could be utilized to generate pseudo-random streams of user events such as clicks, touches, or gestures, as well as number of system-level events to stress test the application. It's quite easy, effective to use, and you don't basically have to spend any time and effort in building a specific framework to utilize such utilities. So, in essence, to summarize, testing mobile applications in Agile model require not only planning to ensure readiness in terms of infrastructure setup, analysis of relevant business validation tests, and efficient testing techniques like test automation and performance testing, but also a mindset shift to align to the business needs rather than technology requirements alone. Plan and implement testing based on what business requires rather than what technology demands. Now, we at Hexaware offer end-to-end testing services when it comes to mobile application testing. So we basically involve in understanding the portfolio of the requirements of a client which involves providing consultancy services in terms of assessing the requirement for end-to-end mobile testing strategy, providing support and mobile test tool evaluation, and formulation of specific frameworks based on the client requirements. We've also developed methodologies with respect to various types of testing, be it functional, compatibility, usability, stress testing, etc. And by virtue of our experience with various platforms, we have invested in creating a usability test suite. It's a generic usability test suite consisting of around 300 to 400 validation points that can be used for iOS and Android applications, be it phones or devices. We have also created a reusable test automation framework using commercial tools like ZapFix, Eggplant, CTest, Perfecto Mobile. It's a modular hybrid framework which contains a library of functions based on the platform-specific requirements. We have also developed methodologies for performance testing of mobile applications that involves not only server-side performance, but also performance counters that can be plugged in within your automation suite for validation of device-level performance testing that provides usage characteristics of application scenarios on the device. We have also helped our clients in setting up a private cloud using tools like Perfecto or CTest, or we can provide services in a commercially available public cloud model to ensure that the testing can be conducted in a collaborative way across multiple teams. Last but not least, we have also developed frameworks around open source solutions for clients that require cost-effective solutions based on their requirements. Now, at this point in time, I would like to open this session for question and answers. So we have received a number of questions from the audience during the session, and I would be taking these.
Thanks for the insightful presentation, Vinayak. We have an overwhelming number of queries for you, so let's quickly take up the questions now. I request you to please read out the questions and their answers so that all our users may listen to the insights.
Sure. Sure. So the first question is, can you suggest the best automation tool for mobile applications, both iOS and Android? Well, there are multiple tools that are available in the market currently. We have Perfecto Mobile, CTest, then JAMA Solutions, Eggplant, ZapFix, etc. Based on my experience, I mean, most of these tools have good capabilities. However, there are certain factors or parameters that I would consider would be important. So these could be in terms of the support for the new devices, support for the new versions that are being introduced. And one of the most important factors when it comes to automation would be with respect to the type of technology that the tool utilizes to automate. Some tools, most of these tools actually do utilize only image and text automation support, whereas some of them, like CTest, Perfecto Mobile to some extent, and JAMA Solution, would utilize native automation technique. So what it means is, as I explained, you would have access to the native properties provided by the tool, provided by the application UI, and you would be able to utilize that in your automation scripts. It is exactly the same what tools like QDB would utilize for test automation. So native automation is considered always superior because down the line, if your application UI changes, you're not changing the script. You're only changing the underlying properties that would change, and those do not change in most cases. So I would rate tools like Perfecto, CTest, or JAMA Solution to that extent much better suited for mobile application testing on both Android and iOS platform. Based on my personal experience, I have utilized CTest quite extensively, rather other tools as well, but I found CTest quite efficient in terms of automating iOS and Android applications. The next question is, what are the prerequisites to learn application testing? I believe this is with respect to mobile application testing. So the most and foremost thing, and I'd recommend to some of the users who participate in these webinars, is to ensure that you have a good handle on what kind of operating systems you'll be targeting for your testing. So get a better picture of what are the various versions available in the market, what are the features that these versions introduce, and then create a testing strategy based on that. The second important characteristic part of your application testing is to understand what type of application is to be tested and what are the various parameters with respect to the market usage characteristics that would be introduced with that application. So which involves understanding the usage pattern of the devices in that market region. It could also be important to basically understand the usability guidelines that the application will be supported on the platform. So for example, if you are testing an application for iOS usability guidelines are different from that of Android. So we need to really understand what are the usability guidelines defined for iOS and Android to be able to ensure that those characteristics are introduced in our testing strategy as well. The third could be with respect to understanding the performance testing strategy for these applications, especially important when it's a external or customer-facing application. So performance testing at server level would require exactly the same approach as you would for a web-based or a client-server application. Whereas at the device level, which is also very important, you would need to understand how your application impacts the device usage characteristics like CPU, memory, or battery usage, in which case you need to understand some of the system utilities that can give you an insight into various degrees how your application is impacting the devices. So in case of Android, for example, as I mentioned before, it's better to understand the usage of ADB utilities because ADB provides a lot of information with respect to how your application is providing feedback to the device usage characteristics. So there are utilities like DumpSys, DDMS-related tools that could provide you information regarding that. Next question is with respect to how can you please provide how Agile testing is done for native web and hybrid mobile applications. So in terms of testing native web or hybrid mobile applications, it doesn't really matter if you are testing it in an Agile or a non-Agile model. The important key here is to basically have a clear understanding of what types of testing you would be conducting on each of the sprints for these different models, so for these different applications. So what it means is that you would be defining testing imperatives which would change for native web or hybrid mobile applications. For example, for native applications, usability is an important aspect, whereas for web applications, usability would be different because it is not tied to the operating system, but to the browser in which your application is, the mobile browser in which your application is being rendered. Likewise, for hybrid, you would use a combination of the strategy which is utilized for both native and web applications. So once you have defined the testing types, which would include a combination of functionality, usability, performance, compatibility, you would have a better understanding of how you would be distributing these testing types across various sprints. Some sprints would focus more on functionality and usability, while other sprints, depending on the objective of the sprint, or rather the user stories that are being implemented in the sprint, you will be focusing more on the platform-related tests. So be it native, web, or hybrid applications, the first and foremost approach would be to ensure the right testing types align to various applications, and then deciding what testing types will be focused on in specific sprints based on the objectives of requirements. The next question is what to do if we do not have all testing devices? Well, you know what? It is quite a very important aspect that we have all faced during our testing on for mobile applications. Most of the users I've seen would be using emulators or simulators in terms of actual devices, as opposed to actual devices if they don't have a right catalog of devices procured as part of their testing. Now, personally speaking, and based on my experience as well, we do not recommend using emulators, simulators in all types of testing. It could be utilized for, to some extent, functional testing. However, when it comes to usability testing or even compliance testing, etc., you should never use emulator simulators because these do not really mimic the actual application behavior on the device. The application behavior may change on different devices, so you have to always ensure to make sure you have the right matrix of devices procured. In some cases, if you don't have the actual devices procured locally, you can choose to use some commercial models like Perfecto Mobile or Device Anywhere that provide a public domain where you have access to multiple devices in different regions of different operating systems and different versions. So a public cloud model could also mean that you are paying on an hourly basis, so you need to make sure your testing budget also is in line with how much effort you would require for testing. So let's say if you have 100 hours of testing effort and vision for a particular project, you need to basically prepare yourself in terms of ensuring that you have that kind of budget as part of a project to spend on a commercial model like that. The second approach would be that you can choose to basically procure devices based on the market statistics, or rather, let's say if I'm testing an application for Android, and Android has multiple devices in the market, I can choose to use the most popular models based on the market statistics. And these statistics can be obtained from certain websites that are reliable. For example, you may choose to use one model of HTC and Samsung, depending on which of these would provide a good coverage in that specific area. Certain models are more probable to be used in specific regions than others, and that would provide you good coverage of testing as well. So there's a question which says, say I want to go ahead with performance testing, as we know that this will be the last phase, though we say we need to get this exercise implemented from the beginning. How does Agile assist in performance testing on mobile applications? Now, this is a very important question, and I've actually noticed that some of us grapple with this as well. We think that performance testing is is something that you would be conducting only at the end of the Agile test cycles. So what it means is that you would actually be conducting performance testing in the last few sprints, which is not true. And I think we should conduct performance testing anytime there is a new web service is being implemented. Every time in each of the sprint, when you introduce a new business scenario or new functionality, there should be performance testing done either at the device level or server level. So what I would do is basically analyze the requirements that are being implemented, create and develop an understanding with the product owners whether this functionality is that is being delivered would be key for my application, and in which case I will check out a strategy for performance testing either on the device or if a new web service is being implemented as an underlying web layer, I would be utilizing that for performance testing at server level. So at each sprint, and it's possible that in specific sprints, I may not have a new web service to be tested, in which case a performance testing wouldn't make sense. However, every time a new web service is being introduced or a new critical transaction is being implemented in your application, you'll have to ensure that you're doing performance testing in all of these sprints. So the performance testing could be either at server level or device level or both, depending on the objective of the sprint. However, I would not recommend leaving performance testing only to the end, which is probably the case in most times. One of the exceptions could be that you may choose. The whole idea is that you are basically releasing a product earlier in the life, or releasing a product or an application earlier in the life cycle. So what it means is that you may choose not to release to production after every sprint, but only after 3 or 4 sprints, in which case you can concentrate your efforts of performance testing, at least the server level performance testing, in the last sprint that is to be introduced in the market. So let's say if you have a plan comprising of a release of say 10 sprints, at the end of the 8th or the 7th sprint, I may choose to concentrate on server-level performance testing. However, the device-level performance testing will be conducted on each of the sprints. There's a question which I believe is not directly related to mobile testing, but rather Agile. Can you please briefly explain about sprint? See, sprint is an iteration that is basically a terminology for Agile, where you have a time-boxed schedule of development, design, development, implementation, and testing, which should be completed in a time-boxed manner based on the requirements you would have planned to be implemented within that iteration. So when it comes to testing, or rather sprint testing for mobile applications, what you need to understand here is that each sprint would require, from testing standpoint, the types of testing that you would define as part of the sprint or as part of the objective of the sprint, based on the user stories you would be picking to be implemented, and then tested accordingly based on the techniques that you would define as part of the testing strategy. Now, we have basically 7 more minutes, so I'll be taking a few more questions. What is meant by sync testing and its uses? So sync testing is basically, let's say, if an application is to be supported on both web and mobile platforms, or rather mobile and non-mobile platforms, you might want to ensure that certain transactions between the mobile and non-mobile platforms are synced, in the sense that when these transactions are performed from either of the platforms, the update happens in all cases. So in which case you would basically be ensuring that as part of the end-to-end testing, that if you initiate a transaction from the mobile application, be it web, mobile web, hybrid, or native, the same transaction is updated when viewed from the non-mobile platform and vice versa. Is it possible to use QDB tool for mobile application? Well, yes, you can utilize QDB for mobile application. However, for automating mobile applications, however, QDB per se cannot be used to identify the UI for a mobile application. So QDB cannot be utilized standalone or by itself for automating a mobile application, but in conjunction with some of the tools, other tools like either Perfecto Mobile or C-Test or Zapfix or JAMA Solution, etc. Most of the tools that are out there, except for few like Eggplant, etc., integrate with QDB and would provide you a way of creating the scripts using the VB scripting that QDB supports. So you can utilize QDB for mobile application automation, but in conjunction with some tool, with some other tool, or a plugin like C-Test, JAMA Solutions, Zapfix, or Perfecto Mobile, or even Device Anywhere for that matters. We are working on to select a tool for to automate a native application on iOS. Can you please recommend a tool? We have QDB license and are looking to plug in that can be integrated with QDB. We are currently evaluating C-Test and JAMA Solutions. Are there any others? Please advise. Yes, there are a variety of tools that are out there in the market. As I said, there is C-Test, JAMA Solutions, Zapfix, Perfecto Mobile, Device Anywhere, etc. And to be honest, I would rate tools like C-Test and to an extent even JAMA Solution better than other tools, because for simple reason being because C-Test has a very, very good support for native UI automation. Native automation doesn't mean that I'm automating a native application, but basically native automation technique is where your tool provides access to the underlying object properties for the mobile application. So what it means is that I will have access to the tool, I would have access to the object properties in terms of the ID, name, or XPath features and things like that. So with that, I would be able to create a script that would require very less effort in terms of change management. So tomorrow if the screen layout changes, I would not be changing my script because the object would be recognized in terms of the underlying properties, which would not have any impact in terms of moving the position of the object. However, if you are not using the technique, then other tools would be dependent on either image-based automation or text-based automation, which relies on OCR image techniques. So in OCR or text-based automation or even image-based automation is not really sustainable, because down the line, if the image changes or any changes in the layout of the screen would have an impact on your script, which means that you would have to modify those scripts. So tools like CTest have a pretty good solid foundation for object recognition through combination of native image or text automation. And I would rate CTest much higher tool than any other for that matters. One thing also to note here is that the cost could play an important role in some cases, because you may not have the budget to basically buy the licenses, which could be very expensive in some cases. For example, I'm not sure exactly the exact license cost that is at present these tools offer, but I believe the CTest is approximately $2,500 for a platform per year, whereas Java solution could be, depending on the license model, could be as much as 8 to 10,000 USD per platform. Likewise, Eggplant could be anywhere between 6 to 12,000 depending on the license model per year, which could be deemed quite expensive. So combination of various factors could be important to select what tool you would be utilizing for automation. But from automation facilitation standpoint, I would rate CTest as quite high on the list. Next question is, Monkey Talk automation tool is best for what kind of applications? How much percentage in an application we can automate with this tool? Tools like Monkey Talk and in fact some other, Monkey Talk is an open source tool, but there are some other tools in the market which also utilize the same concept, where you need to be able to instrument the application. So any native application for which you have access to either the APK file or IPA files, if you are able to instrument that, you would have access to the underlying native properties for these applications. And MonkeyDoc supports automation to using native methodology, which is quite good actually. It works in most cases. However, if you have certain complex controls, UI controls, which are hybrid in your application using techniques like flash controls and things that cannot be easily recognized by the tool, then you may have a challenge there. In majority cases, if you are using a vanilla native application, MonkeyDoc can be utilized. How much percentage in an application we can automate with this tool? Well, it depends on the type of testing you would be conducting. On average, I would say anywhere between 50 to 60% is a good number. More than 60% is something which you can achieve if you have good programming or rather scripting capabilities within your team. It also depends on the type of scenarios you are planning to test. In some cases, if you have scenarios that needs your phone to be restarted, or scenarios that require you to interact with native controls in the device, for example, contact list, messages, etc., then you would not be automate that using MonkeyTalk. So if you plan to automate only the scenarios that restrict within the purview of the application, which has been instrumented, then MonkeyDoc can be utilized for those applications.
Vinayak, sorry to interrupt, but due to time constraint, I request you to take the unanswered questions offline, which I will share with you through email.
Sure, thank you. So thank you so much for joining the web conference. And as Rana mentioned, please feel free to send out these questions, and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you, Vinayak, and I'm really thankful to our guest speaker for conducting this informative webinar today. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgig.com by tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us for today. Have a great evening.